Hi, I'm Michelle Atkinson, and I am coming to you from the sunny beaches of Florida to talk about planting stormwater ponds, determining the best management practices and benefits for ornamental plants in those underutilized portions of residential landscapes. So I want to thank my two colleagues that I worked with closely on this, Dr. Mary Lusk and Dr. Basil Iannone, and the many grad students that were involved with water testing and going out on a quarterly basis to observe and test. Lots of folks participated, and I'm grateful for them. The Florida Nursery Growers and Landscape Association provided some funding for us to be able to do this project, and Lakewood Ranch was a huge supporter in allowing us to come into their community and plant the ponds, as well as paying for the plants and maintenance of these ponds. So we are grateful to them for all of their support. So in Florida, most Floridians do not live on stormwater or on lakes. They live on stormwater ponds. Unfortunately, they're sold lakefront property, and they believe that it's going to look like a lake. However, it ends up looking more like the photo in the picture. Many of our residents feel like that's a wetland, Evergladesy look, and they don't like it once they move in. So we come along and try to educate them on what a stormwater pond actually is, and it's a man-made feature. It's really meant for water quality purposes and also water quantity. The flood controls are in place to capture the stormwater on site prior to moving it into some of the larger bodies of water. So this is not really a stormwater pond, although this is what our residents are looking for when they buy their lakefront property. These are, you're not going to have blue water on a stormwater pond. It's going to be that darker water, and many of our residents want that green grass to blue water look, and we're trying to encourage another way. So why do we have these stormwater ponds? Again, it's really to try to trap some of that pollution. That first flush when it rains carries a lot of the pollution in it. So it takes it then to these stormwater ponds on site where it can capture it before the water moves on into a larger body of water, natural occurring body of water. There's inflows and outflows on these systems, and they need to be maintained. So who's responsible for that maintenance are our homeowners associations, condo associations, community development districts. They're responsible for the upkeep and maintenance. There is labor and maintenance involved, and there's a permit that's required. Florida is managed, our water is managed by water management districts, and they require permits for these stormwater ponds. So this is where I'm at, is Manatee County, which is in Florida, just below Tampa and above Sarasota. And so the community that we worked in is in both Manatee and Sarasota County. It's called Lakewood Ranch. The entire community spans 4 interstate exits on I-75, but the area that we worked in was between 2 exits there, between 70 and University. So you can see in the photo, this is still farmland, but it's rapidly being developed into residential land. Look at all the water. You can see almost every home sits on a stormwater pond. That's one of the things they try to accomplish, is everyone has waterfront property. It is a huge community. It's a fast growing community, at least it was until COVID-19 hit. I don't know how that's affected them because we're not able to get out and find out. But in 2019, they were the fastest growing community in the second quarter. So yay, lots of homes going in, lots of stormwater ponds going in as well. So the background, we've worked with this community before on stormwater pond plantings, trying to get them to adopt them. The way that we did it in the past was to do community-based social marketing projects, trying to do focus groups to find out the barriers of plants for these homeowners and overcome those, developing advisory boards, doing educational outreach. We would get them right to the brink of wanting to adopt, and many homeowners did want to adopt plants around their ponds, but the board would just not vote it in. The board members did not want to be that person who voted in something that everybody did not like, possibly. So this particular project, it was a collaboration between University of Florida, IFAS, which is the Institute of Food and Agricultural Sciences, Lakewood Ranch, and the landscape and pond maintenance companies to try to determine, some of these practices and how plants can help us. So the objectives were really to stabilize pond banks. That's a real big issue down here. To help reduce algal blooms, which is another big issue in these ponds. To see if we could decrease the pollutants that degrade water quality, and then to develop best management practices for these areas. And that's what I was the most concerned with in this project, because I work again in Manatee County, but with landscape maintenance and pond maintenance folks. And these areas just are it's a newer concept. It's not something that we've been doing a lot of. And so there's been a lot of learning that's gone along with the plantings. So let me just define what we're talking about here. You have your pond, then you have your aquatic type plants in the littoral zone. So those would be like your emergent plants. Then we are encouraging these vegetated buffer zones. So these are landside plants up on the dry part of the shoreline. And that's what we're really trying to encourage folks to plant, as well as the littoral zone plantings. So our previous efforts, again, we just couldn't get folks to adopt the concept, even though we tried for many years. We worked out there trying to get them to want to make the change themselves. So with this project, instead of working on the homeowners, we worked with the Interdistrict Authority, which is the folks that are responsible for maintaining all the common area in Lakewood Ranch. So where we worked was on common area and actually not on homeowner property. We selected originally 10 ponds and it became 12, and I'll tell you why in the next slide. But we selected ponds that were, we selected pairs of ponds. So the pairs were similar. Their inflows and outflows were similar. The amount of water in the pond was similar. And we were wanting to compare and contrast plants versus unplanted ponds, or planted versus unplanted ponds. So we had originally chose 10 ponds, 5 pairs, but it expanded into 12 ponds, 6 pairs. And so we went out quarterly and did water testing. And also looked at erosion, observed the erosion on the banks. So this is kind of the before and after of one pond that we worked on. You can see it was low water time, dry season. That kind of open bank area there, bare soils would now probably have more littoral plants in there to help stabilize that area, because you can see in the picture on the right, we had just put in those littoral plants, so they've been growing and multiplying like crazy. But you can see a huge difference in how the shoreline looked. So when we planted this pond, the day after it was planted, homeowners called the Interdistrict Authority and said, hey, we want our pond planted just like that one. Well, the homeowners that were calling were actually on a pond that we had selected as a control, so it was supposed to not be planted. But we had worked so hard with these homeowners to try to get them to adopt plants that we did not want to deny people who wanted plants. So we quickly worked hard to identify another pair, and so that which was originally going to be a control pond became a planted pond, and we found 2 other ponds that we could incorporate for controls. So here's a kind of an example of some of the things that we're trying to promote. You can see in the front of the photo, the foreground of the photo, that it's eroded badly. The shoreline is back quite a bit, and then you see that cliff on the where the turf starts. And if you look kind of in the background, you can see that there's a lot of aquatic plants, and the shoreline is much further out. The cliff isn't quite as exaggerated. In Florida, just like the palm tree behind me here, we constantly have wind, and there's always a little bit of a ripple, if not a wave, on these stormwater ponds. And so those aquatic plants can help diffuse that wave action, the energy of that wave. And so it doesn't hit the shoreline as hard and causes much erosion. So we encourage those littoral or aquatic plants for that reason. Up in the front of the photo, you can see where the waves have taken their effect, but the problem is also that this will undercut the turf, this wave action. And so it's working under. In Florida, we grow a lot of St. Augustine, which grows laterally. And so it will cover up that eroded area, and the mowers don't, the guys on the mowers don't know that it's eroded until they hit it, and their tires either slide into the pond or they flip over into the pond. It becomes very dangerous for them. We actually lost a gentleman a couple years ago here in Manatee County because he drowned from that reason. So having plants there is beneficial for a lot of reasons. We learned some lessons in our project when we were planting, and I'll go through each one of these in the photos here. So turf strips, again, working with the IDA, it was their call on wanting to leave, and you can see in the planted picture the strip of turf there between the plants and the water's edge. And they thought that that would help hold the temporary mulch that we put in place, which was pine straw. They thought that that would help hold that in place and not slide it into the water by having that turf there. But we learned that that area can hold weed seeds, and we have this invasive weed, torpedo grass, that can set up camp in that area and then become a real problem. So it's better not to leave that turf grass there and to let the plants kind of grow together, join in together to shade out those weed seeds and create a unhospitable environment for them. Another one is planting deciduous plants. As you can see in the picture on the right, that's fall, and all those leaves from the picture on the left now are in the water. So that's not something that we want to do. Again, Lakewood Ranch paid for these plants, so they had control of design. We made recommendations, but on some of these, they did not heed our advice. So this is for two reasons you would not want to plant a planting like this. Well, three, there's a turf strip there too. But the deciduous plants, not only did the leaves end up in the water, but also the residents that are here in the wintertime saw this. We have a huge winter population that comes down, and so by the time they left, that's when the leaves were coming back out. So not the best choice. And then it's also a monoculture, and we always discourage monocultures because if a bug or disease came in and affected that particular plant, there's nothing to stop it from going right down the line and taking everything out. So diversity is always a better option. In this case, again, the lake landscape management folks thought that this would be a better bake stabilization plant. It's called Wedelia, and it's actually a caution plant here in Florida for being invasive. So we did not recommend this plant. And then we would have quarterly meetings with both the pond and landscape maintenance crews to find out how things were going, if maintenance was increased, you know, what was going on with each pond. And when we talked about this one, we said, hey, those are invasive plants. I'm really surprised they're not establishing a lot quicker than they are. And the pond maintenance company said, that's because we're spraying them. They're caution plants. We've been spraying them. So communication is really important. Establishing a buffer zone, you do need initially some irrigation to get these plants established. Pine straw can help reduce weeds, retain some moisture to the area. It mats down that pine straw and kind of quickly goes away. So that's a good option. And then of course that communication is critical. Sometimes these areas can actually increase maintenance costs. So you want to make sure that both parties are on board, that you know what you're getting into prior to establishing these buffer zones. You don't want to leave those turf strips. You also want to plant Florida-friendly, in our case, in Florida, plants, and in your case, wherever you're at, plants that just really can adapt to the area. This is a harsh environment. It's dry sometimes, or it's wet sometimes, and the plants need to be able to respond to that. Also, Manatee County is going to work with us. They've committed to $50,000 a year to plant ponds on their properties. And so we are designing some studies to look at native versus ornamental looks, as well as unplanted looks. Fortunately, I'm glad to work with many researchers, and we're looking at wildlife diversity, water quality, and the human dimension of these types of ponds, and what people will accept in their backyards, because we know that these areas can help trap pollutants as they run off the land. The plants have longer root systems, which can help stabilize the shoreline, reduce some erosion, as well as keep those mowers out of those areas. So lots of benefits to it. If you have any questions, please feel free to email me, and I look forward to answering questions or talking with you in the chat. Thank you.